Tom McLoughlin, and you're listening to the Movie Raid Show.
It's time for the movie raid, and tonight's victim is director Tommy McLoughlin, that you know has done Friday the 13th, Jason Lives. Hello.
Hey, how are you doing?
So far, so good. What have we been up to this month so far?
What have I been up to this month so far? Well, I try to keep busy with a number of things. I'm preparing for this class that I teach at Orange County, at Chapman University. I do classes for filmmakers, directing, writing, film production, and so during the summer I just finished a script a few weeks ago on a sequel, or I guess it's sort of a sequel to my Friday the 13th, Jason Lives, that I can't do a whole lot with because of the lawsuit, but I have that standing by, and I have about 3 other scripts that I'm kind of working on simultaneously, all kind of dealing in dark and horrific things, as well as rocking and rolling with my band, The Sloths. We, keep going out and doing gigs and writing some new songs, and catching up with the horror movies as they come out, as well as, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So I'm, excited to see what Quentin's up to.
Do you ever get inspiration into your music from the movies that you actually been directing, or vice versa?
Not so much with the songs. I mean, we tend to have, a darker side to the songs, because a lot of it just kind of deals with classic teenage angst and, kind of issues where you're not having great relationships and there's the anger and stuff in there. The album is called Back from the Grave, so already there's a bit of a horror twist on there. And we have a song called Haunted that was written quite a while back by McLoughlin in the band, and that's in the latest Amityville prequel, actually, the Amityville Murders. Some of the stuff is, stuff that comes kind of out of my personal life.
Do you think that this might actually take a little bit of away from the band, or do you think it would take away from the movie itself when your music's actually in there? It's great that's in there, but in terms of mood, in terms of both aspects of the artist.
Well, it's hard to kind of separate from, my own use of other people's music. And I've made like 42 films now over the years, and so you're always looking for songs that you can either get the rights to, or hiring people to come in and create stuff for you, or using stuff out of, music libraries that sounds exactly right for what it is, the scene is about. So the same thing, if somebody approaches us, as they have, and said, gee, I think this song's really cool and they really fit into my movie, take a look at the scene, and I go, yeah, that totally makes sense. And then we work out some sort of arrangement so they can use it. And, to me, it's a high compliment, and I enjoy seeing, something that's really intended to be listened to, like either live or on recording, to be part of a movie, because it gives it a whole different sense of why it's there.
Yeah, because a lot of films out there, they use bands rather than composition for the most part, and it's not really a bad thing to say this. It's because a lot of these bands, like, they do fit the mood, but sometimes, like, they just don't work out very well. At least to me, it's like, okay, why is this a heavy metal, death metal band and like a dramatic film all of a sudden,
Yeah, it's weird. The heavy metal and electronic music sometimes going into things that, to me, if you're doing something that period, it doesn't, to me, quite work. Was it Sophia Coppola, used some, harder rock stuff in her Marie Antoinette movie. By the same token, Chariots of Fire years ago, had a total synth score, and that basically was okay because it was so kind of classical sounding, but in terms of what it was as music, but played out on something that really had nothing to do with the period. And some people hated that, and other people said, you just get caught up in the movie, and it's just part of the feeling of the movie. But I think like anything else, if you're looking at a movie, you're hopefully experiencing the whole thing and not going, oh, isn't that a great song right there? And because to me, that's kind of pulling you out of the movie, and looking at that, or a particular type of effect, or anything, camera move, if it really sticks out in a way that it kind of distracts from the overall storytelling, then it's, to me, not quite right. You want to have everything blend together for overall effect.
When directing, do you think some risk can actually be a benefit for you, whether it's good or bad, in future projects?
Risk is always the best thing you can possibly do. I mean, I know now that I actually have students that I can preach, the things that have gone on in my career. Anytime that I've risked something, like right down to, all right, I'll quit if this doesn't happen, or I'm going to try this and this could get a huge laugh and not work, or I'm going to try to do this and hopefully it'll be funny, but you don't know until it's out there. So there's something that you have to trust your instincts and go ahead and risk something that maybe isn't the norm. And that's, to me, the way you grow as an artist, is working outside the box. But first, obviously, you got to learn your craft and know how something goes when it's right and what the rules are, and then you break the rules, which is where you start taking
Yeah, and that's kind of a good thing in a way, even if it sounds so bad. But sometimes when you take those risks and they are bad and they might lead to bad things, it can be beneficial to you because you can probably rearrange it into something else, into a positive thing on whatever it is that you're working on.
Yeah, you risk failure. I mean, always. But even if you think you've got everything right and you're playing by all the rules and this is going to be great, you don't have to take any risk on that, you still fail because there's so many other factors that could be involved. Maybe it just came out boring. People have seen that before. There's nothing exciting and new or risk-taking about it. Other times, you do something that's so outrageous that only you and your friends find it funny and nobody else does. But, that's the thing. It's gambling. For the many years that I worked as a performer in Vegas, going way back into the dark ages of the 1970s, I never gambled. I never went into any casinos, like in my room writing and then on stage that night performing. And people say, well, why don't you gamble? And I go, I'm in show business. It's risky enough. It's a gamble enough for me. You don't need to take that money and, stick it in a slot machine or play cards with it. To me, it's about the very thing that I love and I'm passionate about that I'm willing to gamble and take risks on.
Having to direct different kind of emotions, how do you revive an old reaction to make a different reaction?
You try stylistically to do things that are different, but they do have to emotionally ring true to a human being. And I mean that in the universal standpoint of if somebody in China and somebody in South America and somebody in Los Angeles or New York see a particular scene and they all can react to it in the same way, then to me, you're doing the right thing. If you're trying to do something that's really outrageous and maybe somebody in LA gets the joke or can identify with it, but nobody else can, then you're kind of going off track of what art is supposed to do. It's supposed to speak to people in that universal way that we all understand when we look at a certain painting, a feeling, or you listen to certain music, and there's a feeling. And same thing with films. You watch it, and the less dialogue, the less you have to read subtitles. If it's in another language, the better. The more the storytelling is told visually and with music and sound, the better it is. And I think that's what I try to push more towards than anything else is, how can we make the scene just work on that level of just what you watch and what you hear and not what you have to listen to in terms of the actual dialogue. That I think is really important to make actual cinema as opposed to just a movie.
Yeah, rather than just following those type of emotions, you're actually sharing the same emotion with the audience because what you see on that screen, and hopefully if it's performed well on the screen, you're sharing the exact same thrill as they do. And that's what I call the best type of feeling because now you're in the story, now you're with the character, now you're following exactly what's going on. Even if you don't know what's going on, you're right there. But when doing other projects, do you think at the time that you were doing when you first started out the first string of projects that you were doing, do you think it was all really about plausibility than possibility?
Well, my very first feature was a thing called One Dark Night, and that came about purely because when I was in Paris studying with Marcel Marceau, I went down into the catacombs, and that was the first time I personally experienced something that felt like supernatural fear, that there really was nothing down there that was scary or life-threatening, but you were surrounded wall to wall down these long, thin corridors of skulls and bones. And that had a hell of an impression on me. And when I came back to the States, I thought, how could I make use of that? And I ended up writing One Dark Night, which was about a girl that's being pledged into a club that she has to spend the night inside of a mausoleum. And, obviously behind the marble are all these corpses that are in different stages of decomposition and skeletons and whatnot. And then added to that, a psychic phenomena called psychic vampirism, and how this guy was entombed and out, he caused the crypts to open up and out came all these corpses. Now, is it plausible? No. Is it possible? Well, Edgar Allan Poe, something that where you're saying, okay, I'm going to give you a really nightmarish thing, Lovecraft, kind of stuff that we have fantasies over, and it's based on something that's frightening and real, but, you push it into a whole other realm by creating a story that you want to make it plausible that the character is in there for a particular reason, as this lead character, Meg Tilly's character was, but then what actually occurs is of a much supernatural phenomenon.
This also fits in the same category in a way. There have been so many recently released or in the making of Friday the 13th fan-made films going on. Do you think this is actually a smart business move on the artist and director themselves to actually do their own franchise fan film to make a better career in other business ventures of their own?
Well, that's a huge question in that we don't know what the upshot is going to be with all of this stuff. again, we're dealing with people and money and a franchise that has made a lot of money and potentially can keep, making a lot of money. And yet two individuals that were involved in the creation of that are basically stopping things from happening and basically have since 2009. Fans jumping in and making their own thing, some are being very clever about how they're doing it. Others are being just blatant that, we're doing a Friday the 13th and we're using that music. We're using people from the movies themselves and stuff. And I think all's fine until they start making money. And then it's what happened with Friday the 13th, the game. I was involved with that. Came into it through the Writers Guild. It was all very professionally set up and done. And I remember saying to them, how are you guys getting away with this? Do you have Paramount's blessing? And it's like, yeah, they were cool with it and stuff. And in the beginning, nobody thought that the game was going to be as big as it was. And as soon as it got huge, in stepped, the lawyers. And it's like, stop. Okay, you can't do that. I think it's the same thing with the fan films. If somebody starts to really make serious money on it, they're going to do a cease and desist and stop them from doing anything unless people who own the copyright, whoever that ends up being, wants a piece of that action somehow. From a creative standpoint, I think a lot of these guys are using this to give themselves a break. It's like, okay, here's something that people will fan fund because they love this. They're willing to put in the money, and then I get a chance to write or direct or be a cameraman or be an actor. And if they come out well and everything kind of goes along in terms of it's a good little film, that's certainly going to help them get other jobs because they can show this as an example of their work. And that's the whole key is, you've got to get out there and make a movie some way, shape, or form. And, somebody's got to see it and go, you know what, you got talent. I'd like you to come and work on my movie. So from that standpoint, it's going to give some people some breaks.
You discover new things of a different element from the story of Friday the 13th and other things. It's just so many factors are involved in this. And it's an issue on its own. And sometimes it's a little bit good and bad at the same time. Like you mentioned about the, whoever owns the rights is probably going to, jump down on them and say, hey, well, you're going to be making money here in a second. I can see that you are. So da-da-da. But at the same time, these guys are having fun. These guys are trying to show the best possibility of their art, and hopefully that's why they raise money to make a good quality film and maybe show examples of good quality art from, a franchise that hasn't been existing since that, 2009 and so forth.
Yeah, I was very impressed. A lot of really great stuff and great ideas, fresh ideas and stuff. Vengeance, Friday the 13th Vengeance is one of those. I saw another one that played The Boy Drowned, which is a complete surreal, makes no sense, but I loved it because it was like somebody who worked on a Friday the 13th having a nightmare, or some fan that has watched all these movies and this is their nightmare at night. Because it's so out there. I mean, you have to laugh because it's so intense in certain places and so unlogical. Like somebody could say, well, they just didn't know what they were doing, and maybe they did. Maybe on some level artistically they did. But I know I've watched the thing twice because I was so entertained by it. Other one trying to really do kind of straight ahead story. There's a couple of brothers in I think it's Australia, if I remember right, that do a Jason versus Michael Myers, and there's a fight scene that is incredible between these two guys. I mean, really well done and very long, very cool things that are coming out of these fan-based films.
Yeah, it's like almost an equal opportunity, and for some reason, and other people has actually agreed with me as well as I did with them, that some reason this is like an unsung competition, like who can make the better Friday the 13th, Michael Myers, da-da-da. None of these guys should be doing that kind of stuff. It's either like you're making a film because you want to express your art, express the story of what you love, or you're trying to, at some point say, oh, okay, hopefully I'll get hired by Paramount or whoever is going to hold on to the next Friday the 13th film and so forth, just so they can have that job.
Yeah, well, then there's the ones like, going back to Vengeance again, is like, they raised money, but half of, I don't know if it was half or a huge portion of what they made went to the children's hospital. So they're actually using the money for something really good, as well as just taking the amount that they need to make the low-budget production that they're doing. You can't argue with the fact that no studio would ever do that with your movie. It's like, well, we're going to give partially to, handicapped children, or we're going to give partial to domestic violence or something. But I love with some of these fans that when they're doing their fundraisers, they're saying, we're also going to donate money that comes in that we don't need. Wonderful. It's a chance to make a movie. It's a chance to risk, we were talking about earlier. See if you know how to do this. Some have absolutely no experience. Others have done these things for years and now they're not working, so they want to jump in and get a chance to do what they love doing, and they know there's no money in it. They know there's not doing what they do. I mean, they're artists and they're craftspeople that get involved because it's fun to do what you love to do.
Definitely. We do have a couple of submitted questions. That is, Brian Minnick asks this. He says, how many people played in Jason 6? Was it 2 or 3?
Played Jason in Jason 6?
I believe so. Playing as Jason Voorhees in Part 6. Is it 2 or 3?
It's 2. It started with a stuntman, Dan Bradley, who basically did the stuff that you see that's in daytime, and then it changed over to C.J. Graham, who did a couple of the day scenes, and then basically everything else in the movie is CJ.
Didn't he do the arm rip-off scene? Wasn't that him?
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I thought. Okay, and the second question is by Christopher Inlow. He says, what inspired you to write Go to the Head of the Class?
Well, that's a nice obscure question. Yes, yeah, that was part of the, obviously, Steven Spielberg Amazing Stories. I have had a very long friendship and professional working relationship with Nick Garris over the years, and Nick was involved with Amazing Stories and basically said, hey, why don't we collaborate on this story and do it together? So we did the kind of free write. I don't know how everybody else works, but the way Nick and I worked is that, where you take the first scene, I'll take the second scene, and then we'll switch, rewrite each other and kind of go through scene 1, scene 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way through. So it was a really nice collaboration where I couldn't tell you who wrote what. There was a certain point it's all kind of, your minds start to merge into, one big brain that's trying to get the same results and the same feelings about it. And we were really, really fortunate that Robert Zemeckis directed it and Christopher Lloyd performed it. And so, the whole piece itself really was a very cool piece to be a part of.
Nice. Go ahead and plug in any websites or anything that you'd like to promote for everybody to check out right now.
Well, the thing I always bring up, that is another, nothing that's going to make me any money. Years ago, an author, Bill Marjorie, did a book called A Strange Idea of Entertainment, Conversations with Tom McLoughlin. And if you're a filmmaker or an artist, this book is really interesting from the standpoint that, not because it's me, but it basically shows, he takes me from birth all the way up until the time where I started teaching at Chapman University, and kind of goes through what I was going through emotionally, family-wise, raising kids, and showing how the movies I was making during that time were definitely influenced by my personal life. Nothing I realized at the time. Joe sat down and watched every single movie and every single television episode and everything that I did, except for the live stage performances, and put together these questions to really kind of draw me out of, why is there a red Mustang in so many of your movies? And I was like going, I never thought about that. You know what, I went to the Monterey Pop Festival in a red Mustang, and that was such a huge experience that obviously stayed in my subconscious, and that's why I'm having certain characters driving a red Mustang, or just things going on with teenage fights between the mother and my daughter, going back and forth about some issue, that I would take that dialogue and bring it into some Lifetime movie that I was doing and give it to Marcia Gay Harden and the daughter she was performing with, and say that this is how one of those fights goes. Again, things I didn't really think about. I just sort of grabbed what I could as I was making these things. So that book, which is available on Amazon, Yo's intention was, it's really for somebody who wants to make films or be involved in the artistic or entertainment business. And other than that, the band, the Sloths, go on YouTube and you can see some of the stuff that we're doing, and an album, Back from the Graves, the Sloths Back from the Grave, that's out there too. So I think that's all the pimping that I do at this point. And wait on the script for Jason Never Dies come out. Now, hopefully that'll be sooner than later.
Very cool, man. And that is director Tommy McLoughlin.